Marcy, I'm sorry, that's something?
Yeah, I'm moving on. I'm on looking at B8, which talks about physician's ability to obtain a drug screen on his patient, and this may be more of a kind of a confusion. I'm not sure exactly what my question is, but I'm assuming it is to see if the patient is using additional illicit drugs beyond the marijuana at this point.
Right, and yes.
Okay, because depending, and this is where I'll just say I'm not sure, and at some point we may get through it, but is how a doctor will prescribe the medication, how often they take it, how much THC is in it, how much that impairs the individual's ability to function. 1 out of 11 individuals who start using marijuana become addicted to marijuana. So at what point does their quality of life diminish under the use of the marijuana, and how does the doctor do it? So I'm wondering if all of that is kind of fits into this as well, as not only are we looking for drugs that are outside of the use of marijuana, but also if the marijuana levels are impairing this individual's quality of life.
It certainly can, but we didn't necessarily define that as far as urine drug screens, because urine drug screens can be as cheap as a $3 quick cup or a $2,000 gas chromatography, where you actually assess levels. And we didn't want to put anything onerous on the physician or patient cost-wise. I think we were mostly looking for compliance. Marijuana is a gateway drug, just to make sure that it didn't rotate over to other illicits, number one. Number two, to make sure they actually have marijuana in their systems. They're not selling it or diverting it or giving it away.
Yes.
I had a granular question on D. The language says the physician shall complete all of these actions. Is that the physician directly, or a physician designee? And a follow-on to that is in DA. It says if the patient is not registered, the physician shall submit the patient's application. My question is, should there be more onus directly on the patient to do that instead of requiring the physician personally to do that, which is kind of the language that was me.
With respect to your first question, to the extent that it's not, providing treatment or assessment, the physician can certainly delegate tasks. So I think if it's checking systems, and providing that information, I think certainly a designee could do that, and I think we could add that language in there for a designee. With respect to the patient in the patient registry, I'll have to double check the statute. There is some requirement in the statute, but I don't know that that means the physician, him or herself. I think, the physician can delegate individuals, and we currently have a robust set of rules about delegation of tasks as well, and I think those would be available here, that if it's appropriate for the physician to delegate that task, they could do that under those existing rules and set up there.
Yes.
D2 here calls out the preparation of the recommendation form. Is there going to be a created recommendation form that will be uniform and mandated?
Well, I think what we're envisioning for this is that most of this data is already captured either through the physician's registration, with working with the patient registry, and with the patient's registration at the registry. So this idea that there's going to be a document that the physician has to go in and fill out, we anticipate that interaction with the patient in combination with the registration, which can be done by a delegate, basically creating the recommendation out of that interaction.
Included in that was the recommendation shall include the following information, and F was any instruction for the use of medication, that says medication marijuana, but medical marijuana. Is that to essentially say that any would be permissive, that there's not a requirement?
It's not required, but there is a placeholder that we expect in the system that they do want to include it in there.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, on the actual recommendation. Most physicians now are doing e-prescribing. They don't have anything in physically to write on. and I suspect that there are going to be no electronic health records. They're going to put this in the electronic health record. Is the recommendation going to be through the state's registry, where you go and you put it in, and then you can either print it out or electronically send it to a dispensary, or will the dispensary be able to then look at that recommendation?
I think we're working through the details on that, but our preference would be to keep it in.
Okay. Okay. We're going to pivot into 3204, which is the rule on suspension and revocation. Look relatively straightforward. Any questions or comments in that space? And then I think we kind of started our conversation around this in 3205 around additional qualifying conditions. I think we'll kind of wrap up our conversation there as well. Any further commentary around that we haven't already talked about?
Again, I think this is another area where we're following statute pretty clearly. One of the concerns that I had at the time of HB 523's drafting is this concept of insufficient to treat or one of the things I was hoping to see in these rules would be some more meat put on the bone of what that looks like, because I think, as it's already been noted by Dr. Wank, that we have concerns, I have concerns, that it's going to be very difficult to add conditions here. And so if one of those hurdles is that conventional medical therapies are insufficient, that can be interpreted to be a very broad hurdle and could be the whipping boy on any condition that would present itself. And then the second concern that I have is that the state medical board shall not consider a petition seeking to add a broad category of diseases. I think chronic and severe pain was pretty broad, and I think that there are other conditions that are already on this list that are pretty broad. So would that be to say that the breadth could be interpreted from that statute to include things that were that broad, but no broader than those, or it just seems to me that these are two kind of poison pills to getting anything else out.
I mean, we really track the statute very closely, so, and we certainly are seeking input on ways that we could improve this process. The board does not currently have anything like this that we do. So, we're in uncharted territory as well, and we want to make sure that we're having enough information for the board to make good, informed, credible decisions. I think we're definitely seeking input with respect to this rule. As far as the broad category, we're mirroring the statutory language and really have not had a lot of discussion about how we are interpreting that.
I think it's fair to say we will expect a bit of public comment in this space.
Yes.
That I am sure will be taken into consideration as we do what we can within the guidelines of the statute as it's handed out to us. I think I'm going to wrap up this section of the conversation. So, of course, as I alluded to earlier, there is always now an open period to submit more public comments on this matter. Before we take a break for lunch, however, I'm going to invite Matt Corlett here. There he is. Here they're coming. Okay. Matt Corlett, who's the Director of Admin for the Board of Pharmacy, and Vicki Witt, who is the HR Manager. Just in case you have any questions on how to navigate anything inside the OAK system, since you are all now employees of the state of Ohio, that it is another little tricky piece of work. So they're here to answer questions, go through some action steps with you, just to be sure the mechanics of taking care of business as a state employees as clear as we can make it for you. Matt, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Matt Corlett. I'm the new Director of Administration here at the Board of Pharmacy. Vicki is passing around packets, and we're just going to run through several points today to touch on. But the most important thing I'm going to say today regarding anything payroll, travel expense related, anything administrative, Vicki and I are your administrative support team. Please reach out to us with any questions. A lot of this, as we talk through it, may be somewhat helpful, but when you're actually getting ready to do an expense report, it's probably going to be helpful to call us and just say, okay, I'm looking at the screen, walk me through it, and we're happy to do that. So everybody's got a packet. First thing we want to talk about, if you haven't already done so, please set up your Oaks password, and the second and third pages walk you through the steps of how to do that. That will allow you to get into the Oaks system and do all the fun stuff that we do with Oaks to keep the world running. Related to that, the fourth page of the packet is an online tutorial that allows you to set up a forgotten password question. That allows you to reset your password online without having to call through the help desk. A lot of times it's just more convenient. You always have the option of resetting your password through the help desk. It's just doing that step gives you another option. And and again, I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. Please stop if you have any questions for us. And again, most importantly, when you're actually doing it and it's like, this is not making sense to me, give us a call and we'll walk you through it. Finally, please update your email address. Once you get the password part done and you're logged into Oaks, you can go into, there's another page in here that talks about updating your email address, and just walk you through that. That's the email address where any Oaks-based communications will go. So when we again talk about travel expense reports, when those are approved and when they're staged for payment, you'll get an email notification basically the money's coming towards you. This is the email account where you want that to go. So that may or may not be one used for other purposes, but for this, that's where you configure it. It's self-service, so you can update that as often as you like, as your needs require. There's a lot in the universe of travel and expense reimbursement. Because these are one-day meetings, and as I understand it, there's not overnight travel on the itinerary. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about just mileage and parking reimbursement. If at some point you have need for overnight travel, the key thing to know is that overnight travel, anything out of state involving airline travel, car rental, anything like that, requires a travel authorization in advance of the travel. So again, if that's on the horizon, just give us a call and we'll walk you through it. You know, a little bit of a recording here, but it is, I think, honestly, the most helpful thing I can say regarding this whole process. So, so two expenses that you will likely incur on a recurring basis are parking reimbursement and mileage reimbursement. Mileage reimbursement is from your originating location, typically your home, and to a new location. You can, and there's instructions in here for round trip mileage. There is a one-way mileage option as well that might be useful in some circumstances. Again, when we get into the expense report view, you'll see the different drop-down options, and we can walk you through it at that point. Parking reimbursement, key with that, there's a parking option in the expense report that you select. It's going to ask for your destination, where you're going, and then this is the fun part. Makes our life interesting. By rule, if any expense over $10 requires a receipt to be reimbursed, Oaks thinks it's $10. So if your parking is exactly $10, it will require an attachment, but a receipt is not required. You can literally attach a blank sheet of paper that is actually the official Oaks instructions. Just attach it if it's exactly $10. So you can attach a receipt, you can attach a blank sheet of paper if it's right at the $10 mark. Over 10 doesn't require a receipt for reimbursement. On the mileage side, reimbursement rate is currently 52 cents a mile. Also, budget management sets that quarterly. They put a memo on their website every time they update it. You don't really have to worry about that. You just plug in the mileage. And typically, people just use Google Maps. You don't have to, level a mileage wheel behind your car the whole way down. You can just, based on the mapping program, it's so many miles. You'll plug that mileage number in, and Oaks will calculate the reimbursement amount at that rate. It knows the rate. And so even if the rate changes, like you're submitting in January for December expenses, and the rate changed for that quarter, folks will know, oh, you traveled in December, it'll calculate the correct rate. Let's see. There's a web tutorial for mileage reimbursement. There's not for parking receipts, but again, we can walk you through that if you have any questions on it. Very, very important. You have 60 days from the date the travel occurs to submit for reimbursement. Very important to get within that 60 days, and there are some unique circumstances that can go a little bit longer. There is a very hard stop at 120 days. So be sure to be prompt about that, and that gets you the money faster and it helps smooth the process. So that is a very quick overview of what we have on that. So we will these in November and December. I imagine most of your expenses from both board meetings, or both committee meetings, sorry. And so submit those. You can submit that on one report. Just include those with different dates.
Sweet dreams are made.